You're listening to Filmmaker Fridays, an Up in the Balcony series presented by Sugarbush Hill Productions. And here's your host, Richie Winslow. Hi everyone, my name is Richie Winslow, and I would like to welcome you all to Up in the Balcony with me. Tonight, I have a really special guest with me, and his name is Nate Hapke. So, to kick things off, Nate, where did you come from?
Where did I come from? Beth and Kenneth Hapke, originally born and raised in Connecticut, and then I finished up high school and college in upstate New York, Syracuse University. Go Orangemen. Yeah, I came from a family of appreciators of art, but not necessarily ones that create art. So it was really nice when I said that I wanted to act, that I got such amazing, support from my family to just start doing that. And then when I got to college at Syracuse, there was an introductory multimedia storytelling class that put a camera in my hand and allowed me to adapt all these short stories that I was writing when I was younger, and all these different performances that I was thinking about when I was younger and, using into short screenplays and shoot them and turn them into the movies that I always grew up loving and appreciating. And it, just kept on building from there.
Okay, that's perfect. Could you tell our audience what was the first film you remember seeing, and what did you think of it?
I thought about this because you sent me the questions, and I was like, I want to really think about this. And the first movie that I remember seeing is A Muppet Christmas Carol from 1992.
Nice.
And I remember loving it. We would watch everything as kids, but I just remember that was one of the ones that we'd watch over and over again, and that's one that I can't remember watching anything before that, because I was 3 at the time that it came out, and I think that I don't know, I remember loving it. I still love that movie to this day, and it always has this emotional resonance with me, because I'm like, I don't know, I just want to get into it with Michael Caine singing and dancing.
With the Muppets too.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. So that's the first movie that I remember watching.
Yeah, because I think for me, I think the first film that my family always tells me is that sitting front wall at like one of the like reissues or like a screening that a theater had about Fantasia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's crazy because they say I think my mind was so perplexed about like seeing all these colorful images and whatnot just like going on the screen. I don't remember much of it, but I think my favorite thing that I remember vividly was that I was either around 4 or 5. I don't remember the date. I remember seeing Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and I was so entranced with that film, even though it was R-rated, that at the end of watching it for the first time, I went outside, stripped myself naked, thought I was a Terminator, and started riding the bicycle down the street and whatnot, and my parents started chasing after me. So
That's amazing.
I know.
That's a movie.
So Nate, could you tell me some of your favorite films to date and why? And if you can't describe about some of your favorite films, what's films that you more than often go back to, to watch?
Sure. First and foremost, I'd have to say Requiem for a Dream. I don't know if that was the first R-rated movie that I ever saw, but I know that it was one of the most affecting movies in my history of watching just any sort of content. It really transformed me as a viewer and me as a storyteller in terms of type of stories that I gravitate towards, type of characters that I relate to, the type of characters that make me feel, something, make me feel human.
I remember that was the first film that I remember, like the editing of that film really like affected like me mostly, about how all the cuts and whatnot was just showing just how like all the characters devolved into what they become at the end. So it's like,
and the use of the score too, to make the transitions with the editing was really, really, really effective.
That opening credit scene, I still remember vividly watching the first time. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
So you were telling me before that with Requiem, that transitioned you into The Fountain.
Yeah, because Requiem was my first introduction to Darren Aronofsky. I know it was his second feature. Actually, I ended up watching Pi later, and I appreciated the fact that there were a lot of aesthetic things that he set up in Pi that then he really perfected in Requiem, just in terms of like the extreme close up on the eyes and shots along those lines. But The Fountain was another one of his movies that I just absolutely loved. Hugh Jackman and Ellen Burstyn again and Rachel Weisz are just phenomenal in that movie. And there were so many themes in that movie that I think are universal and that stand the test of time. And yeah.
I was gonna say with The Fountain, that's also a great story because that was when that came out. Because that came out like what, Thanksgiving 2006. So
wow, yeah.
So I chose that as our Thanksgiving movie, and with like the whole extended family, and we went to watch it, and then I think people were like, what?
Who is this kid?
Yeah, who is this kid? Like, what did you get us? She was like, it looked cool, you know. But I remember I liked a lot of it. I think it's one of the films that I want to go back and watch again because like I don't think I watched it in full since seeing the theater, but I've never seen like every time on TV now, like bits and pieces and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
I need to go back and rewatch it. It's been probably about 10 years since the last time I saw it. But yeah, it's always funny for me because Requiem is one of those movies that I can go back and watch over and over again. I don't do that a lot, but that's one of the movies that I actually can go back and watch over and over again and still feel the same way I did the first time that I saw it. Yeah.
I remember there was also a great story with Requiem that I remember a bunch of my friends and I like, oh, what's a great movie that you recommend? I'm like, oh, we could watch Requiem. So we watched it, and then I think by the end of it, I think they were all like, oh no, like not like oh no, like I think they were so moved and like profound and affected by it that I think like, no one talked for a few minutes after like we all sat in like silence like. Oh.
I stand by the assertion that obviously I haven't made on this series, but I've made it before that, if we showed that movie in middle schools, no one would do drugs. You would just eliminate an entire generation from doing drugs.
Because I would agree with you on that, and it's also one of the things that my parents, since they're both doctors, when I watched it with them the first time, they told me that was probably some of the most accurate depictions they ever seen of addiction as well. That is that this is accurately how someone acts and behaves. So it's like, oh, you know.
Yeah, and it's fun now actually that I'm thinking about it foundationally because one consistent theme throughout all of the short films that I've made and the stories that I've told is the importance of genuine human connection, and it's amazing that sort of foundationally with that movie there's this absence of and longing for genuine human connection, and the fact that it's missing, there's a void that needs to be filled. So it's interesting.
And that ending is powerful. That it shows that at the end, what as you allude to, everyone wants connection, but at the end of it, they're all
by themselves and they're all in the fetal position.
Yeah. Well, and then it was always great to see. Well, not great, but it's a powerful image that anyone can make a fetal, but with Joe Leo's character at the end, he couldn't make the fetal because of how he became not how his arm got amputated at the end, and so it's like a really powerful image. It's like just how they all devolved. Yeah. You know. Yeah. So, well, that's been a nice tangent about the appreciation for Requiem, but so what was that one moment or that one film that you made that drew you into the world? Or would you say Requiem was still like that gateway for you into making films?
Into making films? Yeah, I mean,
or drew you into the world about how does all this work and whatnot?
It's a great question. I think that Requiem probably drew me in from a writing standpoint. So I think that, I was going through a lot when I was younger, and I think that a lot of my writing was stream of consciousness, sort of working through the different stresses and agitas and, whatnot that I was experiencing as a kid that was coming of age. And I think that Requiem encouraged me to use writing in a way that could work through stuff. And I was seeing writing as, especially in the short format, seeing it as a catharsis. But I think, strangely enough, what got me into actually shooting stuff, Dude, Where's My Car?
Classic film,
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And then there's these characters that I can't remember what their they were in a cult, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but they always
Zoltan?
did like the Zoltan thing.
Zoltan, yeah.
And so my friends and I, when we were in middle school, for a class project, we acted, because we all loved that movie, and we acted like, we were these members of this cult. I actually made those bubble wrap suits.
You guys pinch each other with the bubble wrap?
Yeah, and we shot that, and it was that was super fun. That was the first thing that I can remember actually shooting, other than still pictures with disposable cameras at different birthday parties and stuff along those lines.
I think for me, I don't know for me the exact pinpoint, but I remember a vivid one was when Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie came out, because I became a fan of the character when I was like, I think like 3 or 4, and then like I kept hearing like they were gonna make a movie, and like I believe when I see it, and then when like the production finally started happening, I think that was one of the first times I really used the internet to try to see like all the behind the scenes about how's this work, and whatnot, and I think on jumping off that, I think that led me into watching like all like the behind the scenes about how movies got made and whatnot. So I was like, oh, this is like a field or something that I would really like to like explore.
That's awesome.
Do you remember your first attempt at making a film, or a? Yeah, let's do that. It'd be like, what was your first attempt at making a film?
Well, outside of the class project that was the spin-off, the pseudo spin-off of Dude, Where's My Car, my first attempt at making film that was written and produced and directed by me was probably freshman year of college, collaborating with other students in that introductory multimedia storytelling class. Weirdly enough, it was a horror film, and it was fun to sort of explore different shots and the effectiveness of different shots, and to see how they made me feel and my classmates feel, and to see if they actually cut together was really fun. Yeah, I mean that was really my first foray into doing it in an organized fashion, that I was really feeling like I was learning from it, and I was starting to appreciate the art of collaboration with other artists, and yeah.
Because I would say for me, I think the first attempt at me making film is back in high school. Me and a bunch of friends, we tried to do a modern day adaptation of William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar play, and set in high school and whatnot. And what was supposed to turn into like a 5 to 10 minute like fun thing ended up somehow turning into like a 50-minute short film that we just kept going. We kept improvising and like all that, and we were shooting like after school. So I'm surprised that we didn't get in trouble, because we were going in places that we weren't supposed to film. Watching it now, it's like, oh yeah, like when after you put the kill, I was like, yeah, this movie's could be awesome, like this movie's great, whatnot. And then when you watch it now, it's like, oh man, this movie isn't good at all. But do you still have that whole show? Like
it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
It can be found.
It can be found.
Yeah.
Somewhere. Yeah. So and then since you talk about a little bit about Darren Aronofsky, I would assume that he's one of your biggest idols or inspirations.
I used to for film. Yeah. I used to think that he was going to be a bigger inspiration than I think he and Christopher Nolan also turned out to be, because sort of more contemporary wise for filmmakers, I would say Barry Jenkins has been more sort of transformative in terms of what films can do and what they can make you feel, and the importance of telling different types of stories, really human stories. Yeah. I always thought, when I was starting out, that I was going to primarily focus on psychological thrillers. Like when I was writing and thinking about, some of my favorite directors and some of my favorite films, I was always thinking that even though Requiem was so transformative for me, that I didn't think I was going to make stuff like that. I think I was going to make things that had the big twist, like Nolan's Memento or...
and Night Shyamalan's like in his earlier work,
Yeah, but then as I started making stuff, I realized that the types of stories that I wanted to make were dramatic character pieces, and it wasn't until and obviously there are really amazing examples of that throughout the history of cinema, but just in the last couple of years, Moonlight was just the epitome of that for me. just the affecting nature of all the different performances, the use of the close-up, the use of the portraiture within the close-up, to ally the audience with psychologically what the characters are going through. And
it's just a masterful film that when you watch it on the screen, it's like, whoa, like it hits you like a ton of bricks, and you don't expect it, but then like within like 10-15 minutes into it, it's like, oh man, like this is really like it's a really moving way of, as you said, about how Barry Jenkins portrays the story, and how the 3 sections of Cylon, I was just so moved about how effortlessly he blended all the 3 like sections, so it felt like one seamless. Nothing ever felt out of place.
Yeah.
You know, and that is I know that we're going off tangent a little bit, but that is still one of the film scores of this to this day that I go back to and listen to from time to time.
Oh, really?
When I do walk all that, because it's just a beautiful symphony of a piece.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And it was an amazing compliment to the imagery that Barry and his DP put together. So.
Yeah. So the biggest thing why you're up here up in the balcony with me today is you just premiered your latest short, To the Moon and Back.
That is true.
So can you tell our audience how To the Moon and Back came about?
I can. So the story is the final moments before a man is tasked with having to eulogize his own mother. The imagery that I was working through at the time, it was crazy. It was like a day nightmare, instead of a daydream. I was at my desk at work, and I just saw this image of my mother's face, but she was in a hospital bed, and she had a tube in her throat, and she was trying to communicate, and she was really scared, and she was really vulnerable, and she couldn't communicate, and that made her even more feeble, and she felt like she was suffocating, and there was nothing that I could do. And it just hit me, and it put me through. That was a really rough 2 or 3 days, because it was just this image that I couldn't get out of my head. And what I've really appreciated is that over the years I've turned to writing as a cathartic exercise for me to work through stuff like that, especially. And I thought that was just kind of one of my biggest fears, but later working through it in therapy did I realize that was actually something that I saw when my mother, that I'd completely put out of my head. It was something that I saw when I was very young, when my mother was in the hospital after her surgery, and she went into anaphylactic shock, and she was in the ICU, and I was very young, and I walked in there, and I saw her wake up when she was supposed to be under, and she had the breathing tube in, and she was scared, and I'd never seen her that scared before, and I had completely repressed that until that day, but 1.5 years ago. And so I wanted to write it down. I wanted to work through it and not dismiss it. And so I got it on paper, and I was like, I like this as something that scares a grown man who's brought to this transitional period of time in his life where he is now not able to be comforted by a parent in the way that they were able to take care of him before, because they need taken care of. And that's kind of a natural transition that happens in life, is that our parents take care of us and we grow up, and then at a certain point they get old and feeble, and we take care of them. But I kind of wanted to use that imagery that I was experiencing as kind of the basis for the inciting incident. Like his mother's just passed away, but the last memory that he has of her is of that scared face. So much so that that's all that he can see. He can't even remember her smile. And so I especially in my short films, I love keeping it about the moment, not cutting away to anything else, just trying to live in the moment and keeping it one scene. Not only from a production standpoint is that cheaper and more viable, but it's also, for me, the really cool thing about making short films is you can keep them moments, and they don't need to conform to typical screenwriting structure, like the 3-act structure, which I really appreciate. But as I'm starting my foray into feature writing as well, I'm realizing that there is the traditional way of writing a feature, but you can always defy those rules and change it up and make it your own, and that's really wonderful, and just sort of explore that way. But I wanted this to just be the moment before he has to do one of the most difficult things in his life, and how does he find the strength to go do that? How does he find the strength to go deliver that?
Because I will say when I was watching it, it seemed like that. It's like the audience is kind of like a fly on the wall. Like it just comes in. It's like you're just like thrown into this situation and whatnot, and like not like confused or whatnot. That's not the right tone, but like, you know, a fly on the wall, and you're just seeing what's happening right now, and then and then you get pulled out. So it's like, and then you get to see the whole thing. So because of that moment, did you all thought about doing flashbacks, or was it when you were writing, or was that in any of the drafts that you were writing to the moon back, or was this scene always like in firm place? It
was in the firm place. Okay. There was a really strong desire for me not to leave the room. I didn't want to go see the eulogy. People have seen eulogies before, but I wanted to show the moment before he had to go do that.
Show something different.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. And to see kind of that uneasiness and that almost immobility to go and do this task. And who would be there to help him? Who would be there to help, you know, sort of motivate him? And the title comes from Goodnight Moon, which was a book that my mother, you know, used to read to me when I was really young. You know, I love you to the moon and back, and so I made that actually very integral to, without referencing the book itself. I made that phrase something that was very important to the central character and his now deceased mother, and that's something that he's like so covetous of. It's something that he just needs to hear again. He needs to hear his mother say, "I love you" to the moon and back. But the really cool thing is that I surrounded him with two supporting characters who ended up being just I cast
the pretty good
yeah,
movie, you know.
Absolutely. But so you have his incredible partner in life is a character in the story, and then also the next generation in the family is there as well, and his daughter. And I was thinking about how you could solve his problem of being able to move forward, because he kind of just feels stuck, you know, in this room. And if he's so covetous of that desire to hear his mother say, you know, "I love you" to the moon and back, wouldn't it be really wonderful if there's this connection and this love and this relationship that he's built with his daughter, where he also says it to her and she says it back to him, and he's not thinking about that in the moment. But when she comes in to check on him, and you know, they have this conversation, and you know, he asks her to tell him a story, you know, he gets a little bit of distraction and he centers himself and he feels good again. He feels a connection to his loved ones again. And she's, you know, about to go out to the funeral, and he just needs a couple more minutes, but she turns back just to say, "To the moon and back." And she literally pulls him to the funeral. But for me, it was like, there's a sense of connection to the past, but then the one thing that's going to help him move forward in this time of grief is a connection to the future. And if that through line of the phrasing of, you know, "to the moon and back" could be the thing that allows him to move forward beyond this grief, I thought that was beautiful. So it was just a nice way, as I'm writing this, to think about, because that's one of the things that I'm most scared of, is when my mother passes away.
I feel every day about my mom and my mom and dad. Oh, my brother as well. It's like, what happens when you get that news? It's like, they're not here anymore. You know?
So it's you know, the piece is kind of a working through that imagery that I was seeing, but then also almost ostensibly like a pre-catharsis for me, to sort of help prepare me for what that event might be like in the future. And I'm not saying that I'm going to have a wife and a daughter, but I realized that, you know, part of what makes us human is the sense of connection and the importance of genuine human connection. And I like to think that one of the things that will help me get through that inevitable, you know, moment will be a sense of connection to other people, and you know, that gives me some hope approaching that.
How many drafts did you take a crack at "To the Moon and Back" before you realized you're ready? And from the first draft to your final draft, how did the page differ, or was there any stuff that throughout the drafts, did you add stuff, remove stuff, or you know, just talk about the process about writing to the maybe
Sure.
like about the drafts, and so is it like what I'm going through.
It was an interesting process because I think the part of how I write is like I have this idea of kind of the type of story that I want to tell. Okay, so like I know who the characters are, and I know what their relationships are, and I know what the relationships need to be, and what they need to mean to each other, and then I think about sort of what is the central issue, what is the potential resolution, and does that work? And then the only way to actually get that out is what I like to call the vomit draft, which obviously is not my term, it's what other people use as well. But I found that incredibly useful. But this was the first script that I wrote in a while where like the vomit draft was very reflective of where I wanted the script to be. And I think I only revised it probably 3 more times. And then I sent it to the actors because I was just ready to. I felt good in it, good with it, and it, the important thing for me is that it actually ended up providing that sense of catharsis for me in the moment. So I thought that it was, the potential for it to be successful was there.
And then, speaking of actors, could you tell us a little bit how did you find your three leads, and what did they bring to the table in terms of did you do any more like rewrites, or how do they inform the characters, or did you once you found the actors, did you ever had to fine tune it to work more with the sensibilities of what the actors were bringing to them or to the characters, or how did you just talk about finding your actors and what they brought to the table?
They brought everything to the table. It's first and foremost the lead in the film is Dominic Sempronia, who I had the pleasure of meeting on the set of General Hospital when he was a contract actor, and I was at the time production coordinator, and then my current position of production associate. And from the very first scene that I saw him in, I knew that he was one of the most talented performers in the building, and he was somebody that I just wanted to work with. But I also get inspired by people who watch my stuff and want to work with me. Mm-hmm. He was one of the actors there who expressed interest in seeing my stuff after hearing that I was making things, and he would always keep up with me, be like, "Oh, what are you shooting next?" And on his last day, when we had the cake for him, and everybody comes to the floor, and he gives a speech, the executive producer gives a speech, and then he goes around the room and he hugs everybody. Well, he leaned in and he hugged me and he said, "Send me something. I just want to play." So when somebody like that says that to you, there's a need to not take that lightly, and to really respect it, and to show that, use it to its full capacity. The amazing thing about the timing for that is that him leaning in and saying, "Send me something, I just want to play," was 4 days after I had finally worked through that imagery of my mother. It was very strange timing. And so I said, "I actually have something for you. Just give me like a little bit to get it to a good place." And I sent him an email, sort of what the story was. I didn't send him the script yet. And I asked him, I was like, "Is this something you'd be interested in?" And in his initial response to the email was, "Yes, I'm in for a million reasons." I had no idea that he had lost his mother.
Wow.
Shortly before I had sent him this thing, and I did not write this as a catharsis for him, but there was a sense of connection that he had with this character because he had just recently lost his own mother, and he really loved the relationship with the daughter because he has 3 daughters, and so that kind of push and pull of, I need to be a strong example for these young people, for how you grieve and how you continue living after a loss, but also being able to look at them and see a sense of connection there that motivates you to keep going. Anyway, I sent him the script. He loved it, and we were good to go. I was never going to really make it without him. I kind of made it and wrote it, and with his interest in wanting to work with me, I was like, this is my next project. So when he said that he was in, I was like, perfect, let's move ahead. In terms of the other 2 roles, the character of Judith Westfield, Robert's wife, went to Danielle Rain, who's a phenomenal actress that I had the pleasure of working with on my 8th short film, One More. She played the character that was ostensibly my mother. Another Moment. It was the moment before mother and son part on their ways on move-in day to college. It was one of my strongest directing even to this day, I think, at least visually, just in terms of, camera dynamics and spatial dynamics and framing and how they visually completed each other at the end of the movie. But she's someone that, I will continue to work with and bring her into the fold because she can do anything. And I love working with Danielle, and when I told her about this project, she was so excited about it. And, that ended up being really great. And then the character of Freddie Westfield, who was Robert's daughter in the film, went to my friend Julie Romano, who I met actually at General Hospital. She was one of the interns there. She went to USC for acting. And she and I got to talking. And, I just, one day I was like, we should work together. And then it was always trying to figure out what that project was. And the timing just never seemed right. And I was like, I should probably eventually I'll just write something for her. And then this project came about, and I was like, well, she kind of looks like she could be the offspring of Danielle. And we were talking about that, and it ended up being the right project. The amazing thing is, like I mentioned with Dom, I didn't know, his way into the character was that he had just lost his mother, which was amazing because that's exactly what the character is going through. Danielle's way into the film was about her sense of connection with her husband, who had just lost his parents, and helping him through that grief. And so it was literally perfect there. And there's actually a brooch that she wears in the film that was her grandmother's. So there was a sense of connection that way to her own family that she could bring in. And then Julie was super close to her grandmother and had just lost her grandmother. And she wore a piece of jewelry that was her grandmother's in the film as well. I think it was a pearl necklace. And it was just amazing that all three actors so perfectly could relate to the exact struggle that their characters were going through. Because I think that amplified the words that were on the page, but the script really didn't change after I sent it to them. There was a lot of conversation about kind of the ideation of the white space between the black words on the page, but intentionality and stuff along those lines. But the actors were very true to what was on the page, which was really nice. They wanted to honor that. And any sort of connections, or any sort of deviations that we made from the script were purely motivated in feeling. So I always like to explain the intentionality behind sort of what I'm writing to the actors, just so that they can know where I'm coming from. But I'm never like, oh, you need to say everything as it's written on the page, because that's where collaboration cuts off, and then you become this dictator, and you're saying like, it's my way or the highway, and it's like, no, because ultimately a very beautiful thing that ends up resulting is the result of collaboration with people who are motivated to create something together. Yeah, and there were a few things. There were a few lines that were changed that were actually made stronger, suggestions by Danielle, by Dom, and even by Julie to help either strengthen things or to say less, which ultimately also strengthened things. Because sometimes I can be a little bit verbose in my writing as well. But
yeah, I was going to say I think collaboration is the biggest key to any production, because I feel like when you have a bunch of people collaborating, you can make something even more stronger than what you set out to be. Mm-hmm. And as you said, like once, like if everyone's on the same page and just bring their A game, just have fun with it, like the product will always be endlessly, I think in my opinion, infinitely better.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
What was your fondest memory from day of shooting?
The day of shooting, fondest memory.
Probably when it said rap. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was probably during the lunch break. I love, and everybody's sitting and chatting, like the cast and the crew are all sitting and chatting, and it was for a 1-day shoot and a one location shoot. I think we had like 30 people there, mm-hmm. which was crazy. That's always one of those moments where I'm like, oh, all these people want to help make this thing a reality. I don't know, that imagery of just sort of panning across me, just looking and panning across the room of people eating and laughing and talking, that was really wonderful for me. That's probably my fondest memory, because everybody was there to make the same thing, and they were all inspired and they were all happy and they were comfortable, and it was really quite wonderful.
Yeah. And then another thing that I noticed when I watch a show is that the music that you employ for the film is like it's a little like a heavily music, but it's also really haunting at the same time. So how did this melody come back, and was this a direction that you were thinking of as you were writing, or was this something that as you were finishing editing, you realized, okay, for the music, this is the direction I want to take, and how did you go about with the music?
So I didn't know what the music was going to actually sound like until I started working with my composer. That hasn't been my style so far, where I've had a piece of music and I kind of can conceptualize things on top of that. Yeah. It's been kind of, I shoot the thing that I'm thinking and I edit it together, and then I work with the composer to, kind of, what is the story about? Who are the characters? What are their relationships? And for this piece in particular was like, okay, because I love working with leitmotifs for characters. And so it's like, okay, I want to make one that is, for this particular piece, who's missing? The deceased. So you can actually have a kind of a leitmotif for the deceased that is present whenever there's a sense of silence or a sense of connection to the phrasing of "To the Moon and Back," which might be a bit on the nose, but I think it also just kind of underscores it, because we didn't make it too loud, or I didn't try to make it too loud.
It goes. I would say it fits in the grooves really nicely, and he does. It's not overbearing. It's there.
I wanted it, and that's kind of the thing too, is I wanted it to almost be in the sense of it being like ephemeral. Like I wanted you to feel it as opposed to just like being very aware that it's there.
It felt like almost like it was another character in the story too.
That was intentional. It was my first time working with this composer, Caleb Parker, super talented guy, and it was really nice to like sit down with him, and I told him kind of I wanted to stay with string instruments, and so each character could have their own kind of instrument, and then ultimately they can play by themselves, but ultimately once you get to that sense of connection, they're playing together in symphony, which is kind of what he used to get into it, and he did a phenomenal job with it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's one of I would say a really fun, not fun, but it was one of the more like strongest aspects. I just watching, just like, man, like the score. It will stay with you for like after you watch. Just that it's how it's simple, but it's also just like haunting,
Yeah. Well, the first time that he sent me, because we didn't want that much to be playing throughout the actual movie itself, so that's why it was like very subtle. Yeah. And there are some moments where they're minutes long stretches where they're just the two characters are talking and there's no music underneath it. But that final swell at the end, when Caleb sent me that music for the first time. That gave me chills. So he did a phenomenal job.
It did for me as well. So I know that you said that this is your catharsis for the eventuality of what happens when your parent moves on to the next phase or the next step of this crazy thing that we like to call life. But is there any other stuff, any other message that you hope people get out from seeing to the Moon and Back, on top of about what we talked about earlier about you walking through,
Yeah, I mean, just the importance of family, the importance of connection, the importance of that the same event can happen to everyone in the room, but they all experience it differently, and realizing that we can help each other as long as we listen, and we talk about it and be willing to help each other when we need it. Just that kind of thing. Just encouraging people to be sensitive, empathetic, and just helpful. Be human.
I think at the end of the day, the show is a really powerful film. And then also in the meantime, I know that you're about to shortly premiere your latest show called Entitled White Show. So can you tell us how this show came together?
I can't. Switching topics totally.
Switching topics, yeah. And we'll get back to you on the tonal shift here in a minute. But could you just talk about how this film
came sure. Out? We were gearing up for the premiere for To the Moon and Back, and my writing producing partner Rosie Grayson and myself, we were gearing up for an empty space in our production calendar, and I was like, I need to make something in Q4 of 2019 and I'm going to feel like a failure. And so we were trying to figure out what that project was, and there was a feature idea that we had started developing together for the Sundance Labs a couple of years ago, which was titled Good Grief. And it was something that Rosie gave me the title page of on my birthday and said, "Happy birthday, can we make this together?" And I said, absolutely. And so we started developing it for the Sundance Labs. Did not get in after applying, which is totally fine. But we decided that in lieu of continuing to develop that feature, which was not necessarily something viable at the time from a production standpoint, from a financial standpoint, we wanted to continue making short films. So as we were looking at this gap in our production calendar at the time, we were like, what's the next story that we're going to make? Because To the Moon and Back is firmly in post. She and Her was on the festival circuit. We had after a successful premiere back last March, why don't we take, because we both loved the Good Grief story that we developed together, why don't we take 3 of our favorite scenes from that, tell a cohesive story with that, try to make it emblematic of the tone, the pacing, the visual style that we want the feature to be, and actually make this short film be a proof of concept for the feature that we ultimately want to make, which I don't go into shorts ever having the plan to do. I kind of really I know a lot of people do that, and that's amazing, but I kind of like shorts to just be what they are without putting extra, expectations on them, because I never want my art to disappoint me, because that seems counterintuitive to actually appreciating it. But this one we were like, we can do it because we wanted to make Good Grief. We knew we were going to make it, and we thought that this was a great way to, potentially use it as a springboard. So Rosie wrote the short script, and we sent it to an actress that we really wanted to work with, and she said yes. And then we sent it to our producer, who did a preliminary budget on it, and we were like, holy crap. This is a really expensive short film. If we're going to spend this much on a short, we might as well just make the feature. And so we were like, well, we can't make that now, and we still need to make something in Q4 of 2019. What can we make? And Rosie said, well, what about the story that I pitched you a while ago, if it has to be a short? And I was like, it has to be a short, and it has to be a one-day shoot, but I would like it to be something different from what we've done before. And she was like, okay, so what about that story that's ostensibly the story of how you and I started, dating? And I was like, okay, that sounds great, because it would give us a chance to work with our friends. It's an ensemble piece. They're obviously the 2 lead characters, but it's also an ensemble piece with the different drivers, the different passengers, and we could tell the story of these 2 characters who go from being really good friends to helping each other through their respective breakups to seeing more in each other, and then ultimately getting together at the end. So the story is told over 4 different story nights. In the back, every single scene takes place in the back seat of a rideshare. So it's on 4 different story nights. They're going to and from these 4 different events, and it's 7 different cars, essentially, because we start in the same car that we end in, which is super fun. Which is actually probably a spoiler alert. I apologize for people that have not seen it, but it's just like a fun little tidbit in there. But this was the most, we set out wanting to make an inexpensive short film. It ended up still being relatively inexpensive, but from like a production standpoint and a technical standpoint, it was my most technically difficult film at this point, because you had 3 different prop cars that were going to be dressed to look like 7 different actual cars. We had to shoot reverses, and when we were shooting the drivers who were looking over their shoulders, we had a projector, behind them, which was really cool. But it was figuring out that, and having to move the 3 different cars in and out, and having to turn them around every time we wanted to see the driver. Thankfully, a lot of the prep work from this was helped and assuaged by my day job at General Hospital, because so much of what I do is scheduling, and grouping scenes together based off of what actually makes sense and what we can do back to back. Yeah, it's a really fun story. It's finishing up in post right now, and we're really excited to premiere it on March 28th. Yeah, it's just fun. It's so different, and it was just really nice to work with friends again, and not have it, have these expectations of I'm working with this kind of, this actor who's X, Y, and Z, and not to say that, any of the people that were working in it weren't, whatever, but they weren't contract actors on a soap opera. They were just my friends who are all out here, trying to make it, and just like we are, and it was cool to all get together on a day and just knock it out. But even in that, it's really nice because I got to bring into the fold people that I've worked with now, you know, it was my 4th collaboration with Mackenzie Breeden. It was my 4th collaboration with Gwen Hillier. It was my 2nd collaboration with Aaron Sanders. My 2nd collaboration with Bryce Harrow, my 3rd with Jack Williams, my 1st with the lead actress, Allie Leonard, who I can't wait to work with again. And then I also got to get back in front of the camera, which was super fun. I play one of the drivers.
So you were playing a good old Alfred Hitchcock M. Night Shyamalan move in your show, you know?
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, since your creative partner Wolsey bought it, what's the biggest challenge from as a director to direct something that you didn't necessarily primarily write?
I mean, it's wanting to be true to, it's wanting to understand the intentionality behind the words. So it's so much easier when you've written this thing to direct it, because you knew when you were writing it what you wanted it to, at least if you knew that you were also going to direct it, you knew what you wanted it to look like. I'm a very visual person, and I see things before I make them. And I see things before I understand them, and I see things before I even know how to write them down and to, you know, use words to describe them. And so that's why, you know, directing things that I write is inherently not an easier process, but a more like straightforward process. But in terms of taking a script that I haven't written and directing it, it's just about having that open line of dialogue between me and the screenwriter to understand the intentionality behind every decision that was made, just that I can honor that, because that, you know, it's, yes, I can have a vision for how I want it to look and how I want it to play, but at the same time I respect the effort that went into, you know, crafting the screenplay, and I want to understand it. And so that I can also inform all the decisions that I'm making in terms of working with the actors, in terms of working with the department heads, so that I can, you know, it can all come together well, and it can be a shared vision as opposed to just like I said earlier, my way or the highway.
Yeah.
Because you know, it's certainly a different process. It's empirically still the same thing. Because even when I'm directing something that I've written, I'm still trying to be true to the intentionality behind the characters and their relationships and their movement and where they're coming from, where they're going. So. And
then since this is a more of a comedy than the Moonback was a more dramatic piece, what was the biggest challenge as a filmmaker to switching up the tones and whatnot? So as you were, you know, going from like a really dramatic thing to a comedic piece, as a director, what was the biggest thing to make sure that you get into a different mindset, because you have like all these months and weeks, like you're thinking about one thing, and now you have to put your brain into a completely different like mindset, you know? Is that making sense?
It does, but my comeback to that is I didn't really approach it differently. I still prepped the same way. I still spoke with the actors the same way. I still, because it's, you know, obviously directing comedy is inherently different from directing drama, just in terms of you're constantly thinking, but it is and it isn't, because I think, you know, I prepped it the same way that I prep any of my other shorts. And any decision that I make in any sort of collaboration that I have with the actors in terms of blocking and stuff like that, I'm still encouraging them to be true to what the source material is and to ground it. I mean, I don't see myself ever making something that's like purely slapstick comedy. That was kind of tonally, Rideshare is a comedy. It's a romantic comedy. It's a dramedy in some ways, because it is about the ups and downs of this relationship that's growing. And so all of the comedy is very circumstantial as opposed to slapstick. And I think directing comedy, the biggest difference I think that I found was that I did have the freedom to explore a little bit more, just in terms of like what could be used as a bit, you know, but it had to be motivated by what was already naturally in the cars. And so it was fun to tell, you know, Allie, when she was getting into the car, to grab this bag of chips. And just like, because they're coming from this pregame where they were drinking and the two of them are heading to this party. And I was like, I think it would be really interesting if you guys were having this kind of dialogue as you're gearing up for this party and you're just eating a bag of chips. And I was like, do you want to try that? And she was like, I love it. Like, let's just do it. And so we did it on camera. And it's so wonderful because they're hungry. You know, like they're coming from this thing, and the two characters are hungry, but they're interacting as friends, as they're, you know, and she's like holding it over, and, you know, he's going in, and that inherently also brings them closer to each other in a very nonverbal way, which is really nice. So it's just stuff like that like was really fun for me. But then there's also, you know, trusting that Aaron Sanders plays this very nervous passenger who comes in and is forces himself between the two of them in the back seat, and Bryce's character is always just like, I can move, and he's like, no, I require the middle seat. Like, he actually physically climbs over Bryce. It's because I know he's a naturally talented comedic performer. He's on Silicon Valley, and I've seen his work on that, and I'm just like, because he kept asking me for ideas, and anything that I would say, I was just like, anything I could think of, I was like, I can tell you this, but I also just like, where the scene starts and where the scene ends. I kind of just let him go because I trusted him, to perform, because he understood the intentionality behind Rosie's words, and he made it work better than I could even suggest. So that's another similarity in terms of the directing comedy versus directing drama, at least in my experience, is like, it's still trusting your actors to perform, and trusting your own instincts when you've cast them, that you've cast the right people. And if you're going to do that, you can have your point of view, but after you've done rehearsals and you've had those conversations behind about intentionality, you kind of just have to let the talent go. And if you have to reel them in, you reel them in, but it's the same thing whether you're directing comedy or drama, in my experience.
Which one do you like directing more drama or more comedy, or do you see yourself going in and out of?
I think honestly I like the healthy mix.
Healthy mix?
I really like the healthy mix, because there were some very dramatic scenes in this short that I was able to direct between the two of them, in terms of tension between the two characters, because they get into a fight, and the relationship is there's a lot of curveballs that's thrown at the two of them, and they're just trying to navigate, like, are we friends, are we more, like, X, Y, and Z. And yes, there are circumstantially really funny things in there, but you're also dealing with feelings. So I don't know, life is inherently not black and white, so I don't want to pigeonhole myself into any sort of particular genre. I think this is a really nice kind of wheelhouse, and as we're looking forward to our first feature collaboration together, Good Grief is a really wonderful sort of companion piece to what we started with Rideshare in terms of tonality.
And speaking of Good Grief, can you tell us a little bit about what Good Grief, the log line about what the story is about, and what made you decide in that this year was going to be your first time directing a feature, because you directed 12 shorts.
Yeah, Rideshare was the 12th short.
So what made you realize that now this was the time, and was there any moment that you think you could have made this feature beforehand, or do you think that everything was leading up to this?
In terms of, so there are a lot of questions in there, and I will get to all of them. And to answer the last one that you said, it was really amazing, because just in the last couple of weeks, I turned 30 back in November. That was like a very transformative.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you so much. That was a big sort of transformative thing for me for myriad reasons, but one was just the sense of perspective that I've had on everything, and I've had the intention of being a feature filmmaker ever since I decided that I wanted to make films. Like, I never said that, I never thought that it would just be shorts or anything along those lines. Shorts are my way in. Shorts are my viable way of actually telling stories, which was really nice, because it's like, oh, I'm gonna go make a feature. It's like, that's not that easy.
Yeah.
But I also knew that, like, when I moved here, as much as I wanted to make features, like, I'm really glad that I didn't get the opportunity to do it right out of school, because I wasn't ready. It's a huge responsibility. It's hard to make a short film. It's hard to direct a play. I mean, it's like, without any cameras, and none of this stuff is easy. You do it because you love it. But the really nice thing about, the privilege that I've had to collaborate with all these different people on 12 different short films is the experience of telling these 12 different stories that have a unique through line of the importance of genuine human connection, but also are individual and have had their own issues every single time. So I've been able to learn from each of them and have treated them, even when they didn't go well, as learning opportunities for me to cut my teeth, so that when I did get the opportunity to make something bigger, I was ready for it. Because I don't want to take it lightly, and I don't want to take it for granted, because some people can set out with the intention of making a feature film because they really want to, and never get the opportunity to. Mm-hmm. And so I don't ever want to take this opportunity for granted. But yeah, I mean, I do feel like I am inherently ready to at least try, at least do my best, because of the experience that I've had, and my motivation and my feeling of preparedness for it. Good Grief is, like I said, sort of tonally not really a sequel, but it tonally it fits in with what we were able to successfully do with Rideshare, which is this blending of comedy and drama. And it is the story of, Rosie can pitch this so much better as the screenwriter, but essentially it is the story of Elle is our central protagonist. She has just recently lost the love of her life, and she is tasked with having to return his body to his family, his very colorful family in Western Pennsylvania, and have to navigate the different family dynamics that are present in the 3 days leading up to his funeral. The funeral is actually the fourth story day, so the story actually just takes place over 4 days. The opening scene is, she's on the plane. And then the final scene is, well, I won't spoil that, but the two main characters are Elle, our central protagonist, and then the deceased mother. And there's an inherent friction between the two because Elle is kind of the physical embodiment of why Marla's son never came home. It was like a reason for him not to come home, was this life that he was building with this, wonderful young woman. But what we get to see over time as their relationship changes and grows and strengthens is that Marla always loved Elle. She just didn't know how to show it. She loved him, Marla loved Elle because she provided a sense of home for her son. That's all that she ever wanted for her son. She just didn't know how to express it. And the title of the film is Good Grief because it's funny because, you think about like, good grief, like Charlie Brown, but it also just plays into this idea of well, what is good grief and what is the best way to grieve? And there isn't a right way to do it, but there are ways that are more helpful than others.
For coping,
Yeah.
And then since you made 12 shorts, I know I'm gonna put you on the spot, but of the 12, like picking your favorite child, like your favorite child, do you have a favorite short, or is there one that you're most proud of in terms of how you pull it off?
It's a great question. It's hard to pick a favorite one because I appreciate them all for different reasons. I think my strongest directing to date is still probably what I mentioned earlier, One More. Just because I was so focused on the visual completion for the two characters. Like so for instance, it is through and through a dual narrative. Like the two characters are on screen, same amount of time. It's the mother and the son. And the mother is always in the left third of the frame looking right, and the son is always in the right third of the frame looking left, and there's always so much space in front of them. Mm-hmm. There's this lingering, there's screen dynamics that's pulling them towards each other. And it's called One More. It's all about the importance that in order for them to move on with their lives, they just need one more hug from each other. And so once they get that, there's this amazing Steadicam shot that they give each other a hug. Then all of a sudden the camera wraps around him, and now he's in the left third of the frame and she's in the right third of the frame, and she drives off and exits frame, and then he turns and looks and exits out of the left third of the frame, and they have now allowed each other to leave and move on with their lives. That the rest of their lives exists outside of the frame, which is really cool. So that would probably be it. In the future, have you ever thought of making a cinematic universe or doing like a follow up to any of them? I think if it's motivated, I think if there's more story to tell, absolutely. I'm not going to say no to that necessarily. There was a consistent prop that I was trying to put into all of my stories. Mm-hmm. My senior thesis film was about this character that was working through addiction because he was living with this not self-imposed guilt, but he was living with this guilt that was haunting him over this car accident. And so he had turned to alcohol and pills as just sort of this vice to fill this void. And their particular brand of vodka that he was drinking was the label, so that we could use it, was designed by my girlfriend at the time, who's an actress in the film. It was Core Vodka. It was KOR, and it was this really cool apple core that she designed, and I put it. So it was in that movie. It was in my first postgrad film, Tom and Jerry. It was in my first film shot in LA, Zadie. Then but every single time that it was there, it wasn't Tom drank it in Tom and Jerry. It was in the background of a shot in Zadie, and it was always like motivated. And then I just stopped doing that for whatever reason. I never wanted to force it in there because it wasn't a necessary thing. It didn't really necessarily tell any sort of stories, but it in terms of tying them all together, it's probably the strongest effort that I ever did to say that they all exist in a world where Core Vodka is a thing. Yeah. So
Maybe we should make that into the next bit.
Advertisement for core vodka.
Advertising, you've done. But what keeps you going? Because since it seems like for 95% of the time you're able to release 2 shorts a year. So what keeps you motivated through it all?
Creating helps me feel alive. You know, as
that's the simple as answer.
As cheesy as it might sound, I love creating. I love telling stories, and so once I figured out a viable way to do that, right out of school, so I wasn't waiting for somebody to hand me an opportunity. I just was figuring it out for myself. I just never wanted to stop, and I don't want to stop. I actually, we're gonna shoot Good Grief this summer, but I already have my next short planned for November, and I just can't stop.
because since you just mentioned that you have short and drama, well, how do you go about to make it so since it seems like that you're dropping like many things at once? How do you make sure that each film or each project that you're dropping that could be for potential filming, how do you make sure that each of them get the not time in the sun, but like just make sure that each of them have like equal time, just sit down, just thoroughly just make sure that you not half-assing, but just make sure that each project gets its time in
Yeah, I think it's because I try not to have 2 shooting at the same time. I always try to have. I think they also like the presence of each other help strengthen them and contextualize them in a way that's really fun. If you watch my shorts back to back, you can sort of see similar themes and how they play out with different types of characters. But yeah, I mean, I think having a bunch of different stories that I'm working on and developing and thinking about actually helps each of them, because if I'm ever running across a stumbling block on one, I can turn to another one, focus on this, and then come back to this with fresh eyes and fresh perspective, which I think I'm really thankful for. But yeah, it's just scheduling. It's really being a hard ass about scheduling
and do diligence on making sure, right?
Yeah. No, I you can ask Rosie. There are lists everywhere.
Well, several. Is there any genre that you haven't done yet that you're itching to try at least attempt to make?
Great question. I am making a sci-fi drama in November. That's a short film that I was talking about earlier, which I'm pretty excited about. Just commentary on identity, individualism, what it means to have memories, and what it means to have the same memories as someone else, and does that make you less of an individual if your memory is not yours, but it's yours and somebody else's? So it's, which I could explain more if you were seeing the thing or reading the script, but I'll leave it at that.
But yeah, part of that be the thing that it just seems like what you just described. I think my mind just went explode. Like, how about all of that? So, and I know that your production company,
yes,
is P123 Productions. For those who don't know what it means, what does it mean? Can you talk a little bit about it?
I can. P123 Productions was launched when I was still an undergrad. I was part of what started out as an acoustic cover band, turned into comedy sketch group, and P123 Productions was the production company that we produced all of our sketches under the banner of. But the name comes from the seats where myself and my 2 best friends in college sat in the Carrier Dome at Syracuse University, section 102, row P, seats 1, 2, and 3. And the 3 of us were 3 of the 4 members of that sketch comedy group. So it just felt appropriate to have that sort of be the title of our production company. For me, I've kept using that label for my production company because it not only is a nostalgia factor for collaborating with them and making stuff with them, but also it just is kind of where I started to really not only appreciate collaboration, but really just appreciate it. Kind of takes the quality out of it. That's more of a statement of fact, but that was the first time that I really started enjoying collaboration. So I like to think about that, and I like to think about how, moving forward, when you're watching a movie, you see like a so-and-so film, but it's the filmmaker's name. Like, I don't think I'll ever put a Nate Hapke film before my project, because I just feel like, and there's nothing wrong with anybody else that does that, totally fine. The reason why I don't want to do that is because I feel like it's never one person's film. It's for me, it's the film itself is the end result of all the hard work, passion, and excitement that went into, and the decision making that went into of all of the different people that worked on the film. So I think even if I'm working under a different production company, which will be for actually Rideshare is the first one, and then Good Grief will be the first feature under this new production company, which is Small Tall Productions LLC, which Rosie Grace and I are launching together, which is really exciting. It'll be, Small Tall Productions presents a P123 film. I get to be true to where it all began, but
true to the spirit and the style. Yeah. And then since you launched it with your two best friends from college at the time, what do they think about you continuing the label?
I don't know if they do think about it. I don't think they're, because neither of them are filmmakers. Neither of them are continuing to tell stories. Well, I guess Russell he's a news producer, so he's producing daily news. But in terms of actually utilizing the P123 thing, it'll always be what it was for the three of us in college, and for me, it's just about building on that legacy. So.
And what's your advice to any inspiring filmmakers?
Just make things.
Make things.
Yeah, I mean it's I mentor students every semester for the Syracuse University in Los Angeles program, and a lot of the ones that pick me hear about the films that I'm making, and they want they're aspiring filmmakers, and they always ask for secrets. They always ask for how do I get better at writing? How do I get better at directing? And it's like just do it. Yeah. There are books that you can read on both of those things, but until you give a note to do this, and then you see that it works or it doesn't work, and then you give a different note, to try it slightly differently, will you understand better how directing comes into play? That's how you get better at directing. It's just by getting the experience and writing the same thing, acting the same thing. So I just encourage young people to just make stuff whenever you can. I mean, we're all very privileged because in our pockets we have something that can shoot at 4K now, which is not something that was at the disposal of filmmakers who were starting out at our age in the 80s, in the 90s. I mean, film back then was shot on film, and it was much harder to make stuff. But now independently we can shoot at 4K on our phones, which mitigates the cost of camera rental and tell the stories that we want to tell. And I always try I pitched a thought experiment actually to one of my more recent mentees about, I want you to, using your phone as your camera, because she was looking forward to her senior thesis film, and she was kind of nervous about it because she hadn't had that much directing experience prior to that, and she wanted to do her best with it. And so I said, okay, well that's next semester. Okay, it's right around the corner. What can you do right now? I want you to go home and write a 3-page scene. There are 3 characters and it's 1 location. And I want you to figure out what the struggle is, figure out what the resolution is, get 3 of your friends to play these characters, and that 1 location is your living room. And I want you to shoot it 4 different ways. And I want you to try to give a note to one of the characters to play the scene, this way, and one this way, and see what works, see what you like, because discerning your own palette for what kind, like the way to tell stories, is incredibly important for young people. I'm still figuring that out for myself, even after 12 short films. I'm still figuring out exactly what I want my aesthetics to be, what I want my colors to be, what I want my framing to be. I know what I like, and I know what I've tried, and I know what I want to continue to try to explore with. But I also the only way that you're going to get better is by doing it and failing, and by doing something that you don't like, because then you can figure out what you do like. And to just give up on the idea that you need to have your thing universally liked by everyone, because that's an unrealistic expectation to put on the product anyway. There's a really great book that I read called The Art of Directing by William Ball, and he was the founder of the American Conservatory Theater in New York. And so the whole book is about directing theater. But empirically, I was reading that and realizing how much that I could use everything in that book for directing actors in film. And there's one chapter specifically that was about setting expectations for the production. And so it's in the book, it's at your tech rehearsal, but for film, it's I sit down with my entire company of actors and I just say, and my department heads, and I just say very intentionally, I am not doing this to get famous. I'm not doing this to make money. I'm not doing this to be liked. I'm doing this to be enriched by the experience of creating with all of you. And that's it. Mm-hmm. And the first short that I said that to my entire company with beforehand was not a coincidence to me that once it was all done and I watched it for the first time and it was all polished and put together, that I watched it and I knew what it was. Like, it was the first film, it was Slate, my 9th short film. It was the first one where I watched it and I knew what it was, and I didn't need my mother to tell me that she liked it. You know, it was like, which was an incredibly transformative moment for me, and I've done that on every project since. Setting proper expectations for why you're creating is really big. There's not gonna be one project that ends up being the difference for you. Also, don't try to make your best stuff now. You know, it's so often do we get to determine what our best work was when we've made 10 feature films. You know, it's like, because then, you know, in retrospect, you can be like, oh, yeah, actually, his third film was his best film. Just, you know, tell stories because you love telling stories. Don't tell stories because you want to be loved. Don't tell stories because you want to be liked. Tell stories that are meaningful to you, and tell them in an authentic way that you care about, because you loving the movie and really caring about the movie and caring about the characters, that's what will connect to the audience. But you telling the audience to like this, that's not.
Please love me.
Because you're not. I mean, it's the most important thing is that you are content with your project.
And I just feel like now with technology and, as you said, with phones, cameras, I feel like this is the best time ever to pick up anything. Just try, you know, just go for it, because, you know, it's marvelous in today's age what a simple phone can do.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So to wrap things up, I'm gonna throw some really hardball questions at you.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm sitting down.
What is the one thing that you need to have on set? If it's food, a drink, or like just when you're on set, what's the one thing that you absolutely need, and what food and drink do you want to always have with you?
Oh, that's amazing. So one thing that I always need to have on set, first and foremost, I'll answer that and then I'll get to the food. My prep work, I always need to have that with me. Mm-hmm. That prep is the most important thing to any production actually going smoothly, and knowing how to properly prep and knowing how to properly communicate information to everyone. So the prep work that I do for my shorts, especially when I only have one day to get in a 12-page, you know, short film, the prep is incredibly important, because there are going to be production questions that come up that a department head might not know the answer to when a PA is asking them X, Y, and Z. And so for me to have the answer for everything, even if it's wrong, but always having an answer whenever there's a question about, you know, anything stylistically or aesthetically or placement of things, prep work will always be the most important thing on set for me, that I bring, you know, my preparedness, because I don't ever want to waste time, because there really isn't time to waste, and I don't ever want people to lose faith in me as a leader, because I need to be a strong leader, and part of what makes me an effective leader on set is my prep work. So, and in terms of food and beverages, I get kind of a nervous stomach when I'm directing, so I just try to keep like an RX bar on set, just like egg white protein bar, that I can just make sure that I'm getting calories that I need, can stay focused that way, and then I just try to get as much black coffee as I can.
Okay. What are some of your favorite films recently, or of the last year?
Of the last year, 1A and 1B, in no particular order. Jojo Rabbit and Honey Boy. Those are the top two. This last year.
I think for me for last year was Parasite and Uncut Gems.
Nice.
You know.
Good picks.
So and then what's your go-to movie snack?
Go-to movie snack. Oy. I think it used to be Sour Patch Kids, but it's probably just popcorn now.
Popcorn?
Yeah.
I'm mostly a popcorn person too. And then what's your go-to movie theater?
Well, I have the incredible fortune of being a member of the Directors Guild, so I love going to the theater. DGA Complex 1. They just did a redesign of the entire theater, so everything is like very state-of-the-art. There are, I think, over 100 different speakers, so like it's completely immersive surround sound. It's really crazy, actually. The first movie that I went to see, I can't remember which one it was, but it just was a different oral experience. So that's probably one of my favorite theaters, especially because in that theater, like I've sat next to, or I've sat very close to Jason Bateman. I've sat very close to, actually sat next to Weird Al at one of them because he's a DGA member. And just like seeing people around, when I was one of the delegates for the biennial national convention at the DGA, which is not relevant to our conversation here, but it's all DGA members that are electing the future leadership for the entire union. A lot of my heroes were just like in the room, like, no, I nominate this person, and no, I nominate this person, and it's just cool to look around and to know that I'm using the theater for the same reason that they are, and so it'd probably be that one, because historically it just has so much significance and relevance.
Yeah. I think for me it's the ArcLight in Hollywood.
Nice.
I think because of the Cinerama Dome.
Oh, for sure.
It's just that the whole mystique and just all that when you go there, it's like that watching a film, especially at the Dome, just feels like it was a really different experience, and it's kind of eerie. Not eerie, but it's kind of fun. Like when Once Upon a Time came out, that me, my wife, and some of our friends, actually including you, we went to see at the Dome. It was just like a crazy experience to see a film that was shot on that format being screened on that actual format. So like,
and then
crazy.
There's actually a shot of the
Dome
in the movie.
Everyone lost their mind, which was great.
Yeah,
I think that, and then I just like it all like because of the video and then the audio. It just seems like everything is.
Oh, it's great.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then, what else do you like? I think that's the biggest one. And finally, where can we find you on social media?
Where can you find me on social media? On Instagram, at Nate Hapke, N8, Hapke. On Twitter, at your fave Nate Hapke, because that was the amount of characters I could fit. The story behind that handle, because we definitely have time for this, was senior year of high school when we were signing yearbooks. I didn't want to just write like Hags or Haggis or Hackus, like have the kick-ass summer. I wanted to sign off by saying, like I loved getting to be your friend, have a great time with life, and then I would sign it, your favorite Nate Hapke, Nate Hapke. So I thought it was clever. And so in transitioning to college, I was like, that's got to be the handle. So it's at your fave Nate Hapke. And then Facebook, at Nate Hapke. Lots of really exciting project updates that will be released on different Twitter profiles for at Good Grief the Film, casting news, crew updates, as well as, as we're moving into pre-production, will be through that. So at Good Grief the Film. It's also on Instagram, I believe, at Good Grief the Film, and on Facebook with the same stuff. So that's where a lot of exciting project updates will be.
Okay. And you can find me on Facebook at Richie Winslow, on Instagram at the Mr. Richard, and in Twitter at the Mr. Richard, but it's MR because I can't write the full Mr. on that.
That's fair.
So on that note, thank you for spending some time up in the balcony with me.
Thank you for having me.
This has been Filmmaker Fridays. If you like what you heard, you can go to upinthebalcony.wordpress.com to follow the series, or go to YouTube on Richie's channel to keep up to date. See you next time up in the balcony.